Michael Hayes had always believed trust was the foundation of any relationship. It's why he never questioned his wife Ellie when she started mentioning David from her marketing department. "He's just a work friend," she'd say, describing their collaborative projects and occasional lunch meetings. Michael had no reason to doubt her. They'd been married for 6 years, built a life in their modest suburban home, and were discussing starting a family. Why would he question something as innocent as a workplace friendship? Looking back, he should have noticed the subtle shifts, the increasing frequency of David's name in conversation, the extra attention Ellie paid to her appearance on workdays, the text she'd smile at but angle away from his view. But Michael trusted his wife completely, so he dismissed the uneasy feeling as his own insecurity. When Ellie suggested they meet David and his wife for dinner, it seemed like confirmation of Michael's overthinking. After all, if something inappropriate was happening, she wouldn't be eager to introduce him to David, and certainly not to include his wife in the equation. "You'll like him," she assured Michael, selecting a dress for their double date at Vincenzo's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. "He's smart, funny. Caroline is lovely too, she's a pediatric nurse." Michael nodded, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "Looking forward to it. It's nice you've made such good friends at the new job." Ellie's reflection caught his eye. For just a moment, something like guilt flickered across her face before she smiled. "They're great. I think we'll all get along well." They arrived at Vincenzo's first and waited at the bar. Ellie seemed unusually tense, checking her phone repeatedly and smoothing her dress. When she suddenly straightened, her eyes fixed on the entrance, Michael turned to see a tall, conventionally handsome man in a tailored suit entering with a slender woman whose expression he couldn't quite read from a distance. "David, Caroline." Ellie waved, her voice carrying a forced brightness Michael hadn't heard before. As they approached, Michael extended his hand to David. "Great to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you." His handshake was firm, confident. "Likewise, though Ellie tends to downplay how lucky she is to have you." His smile seemed genuine, but something in his eyes didn't match it. "And Caroline," Michael turned to his wife, "it's wonderful to meet you." When Michael took Caroline's hand, their eyes met, and what he saw there hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't the polite interest of someone meeting a new acquaintance. It was recognition, assessment, and something deeper, a knowing sadness that made his stomach tighten. "Michael," she replied, her voice steady but with an undercurrent he couldn't immediately identify. "I've been looking forward to this dinner for quite some time." The hostess led them to their table, and Michael found himself seated directly across from Caroline while Ellie and David took the chairs opposite each other. Throughout appetizers, he couldn't shake the feeling that Caroline was studying him, her eyes occasionally flicking between her husband and Michael's wife when they spoke, noting their body language, the way they seemed to communicate without words. The conversation flowed well enough on the surface. David talked about their recent vacation to Bermuda, and Michael noticed Ellie asking detailed questions as if she hadn't heard these stories before. Caroline spoke about her work with children, her passion evident despite her measured tone. Michael contributed anecdotes about his engineering projects, aware that David seemed to know more about his career than he'd expect from Ellie's casual mentions. It was during a momentary lull, as their entrees arrived, that Caroline made her first move. "Ellie, that's a beautiful necklace," she said, gesturing to the silver pendant at Ellie's throat. "Is it new? I don't think I've seen it in the photos." Ellie's hand flew to the necklace, a gift Michael hadn't given her. "Oh, yes. Just picked it up last week." She glanced at Michael with a tight smile. "Treat for myself after landing the Westridge account." "Photos?" Michael asked, reaching for his water glass. "From the office party last month," David interjected smoothly. "PR department posts them on the company social media." Caroline's eyes never left Michael's face. "Funny, I don't recall seeing that post." The table fell silent for a beat too long. "So, Michael," David changed the subject, "Ellie mentioned you're a rock climber. I've been meaning to try that." As dinner progressed, the pattern continued. Caroline would make seemingly innocent comments that caused momentary tension, then David or Ellie would redirect. Each time, Michael felt the uneasiness in his stomach grow. When David excused himself to take a call, and Ellie left for the restroom shortly after, Caroline finally dropped her polite facade. "They're sleeping together," she said quietly, setting down her wine glass. "I'm sorry to be blunt, but I thought you should know. I've known for 3 months. The world seemed to tilt sideways for Michael. "What? No, that's..." "There was no office party last month," she continued, her eyes sad but resolute. "The necklace was his gift. They've been meeting at the Parkside Hotel on Thursdays. He thinks I believe he has late meetings." Michael's mind raced through calendar entries, through Ellie's recent Thursday networking events and client dinners, through the inexplicable distance he'd attributed to work stress. "Why are you telling me this?" he managed, his voice barely audible. "Why now, like this?" "Because I've been where you are, suspecting but choosing trust. Someone finally showed me proof, and as painful as it was, I needed to know." She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then slid it across the table. "I hired someone to follow them 2 weeks ago. I needed to be certain before confronting David." The photo was unmistakable, Ellie and David entering a hotel room, his hand intimately placed on her lower back, her face turned up toward his with an expression of complete adoration, one Michael hadn't seen directed at him in months. "They're coming back," Caroline whispered, retrieving her phone. "We have choices to make now." David returned first, followed shortly by Ellie, who seemed to have refreshed her makeup. The conversation resumed its superficial pleasantness, but everything had changed for Michael. Every laugh, every glance between them, every casual touch on the arm screamed their betrayal. Caroline caught his eye occasionally, a silent communication passing between them, the only two truth holders at a table of lies. When dessert menus arrived, Caroline declined. "Actually, I'm not feeling well. Perhaps we should call it a night." "Of course," Ellie responded with seemingly genuine concern. "I hope it's nothing serious." As they prepared to leave, Caroline pulled Michael aside under the pretense of showing him photos of their new garden. "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., Riverside Coffee Shop," she murmured. "We should talk about next steps." That night, Michael lay awake beside Ellie, listening to her breathing and wondering how many nights he'd slept next to her without realizing she was dreaming of someone else. He didn't confront her, not yet. Something about Caroline's methodical approach resonated with him. If his marriage was ending, he wanted to understand exactly what he was losing and why. The next morning, he told Ellie he was meeting a colleague to discuss a project issue. She barely looked up from her phone, probably texting David, and said she was planning to catch up on work at home. The casual lie from both of them hung in the air as Michael left. Caroline was already at the coffee shop when he arrived, 2 cups on the table before her. She looked more composed than the previous night, her expression resolute rather than sad. "I ordered you black coffee." "Ellie mentioned that's how you take it," she said as he sat down. "Thank you." Michael wrapped his hands around the warm cup. "How long have you been planning this?" "The dinner?" "About 2 weeks. I needed to see you two together, to confirm what I suspected." She looked directly at him. "And I needed you to see them together. Why not just call me? Or email the photos?" Caroline sighed. "Would you have believed a stranger making accusations about your wife? Or would you have dismissed me as crazy, deleted the evidence, and warned Ellie about the unstable woman coming after her?" She was right. Michael would have protected Ellie, defended her against what he would have perceived as baseless attacks. "How did you know?" he asked. "When did you first suspect?" "Little things at first. Late meetings that couldn't be rescheduled. New cologne. Increased secrecy with his phone." She took a careful sip of her tea. But the definitive moment was finding hotel receipts he'd forgotten to delete from his email. "I accessed his accounts while he was showering one morning." Michael nodded, recognizing the progression. "And now? What's your plan?" "That depends on what you want, Michael." Her eyes were steady. "Are you looking to save your marriage? Or are you ready to walk away?" The question hit him with unexpected force. Despite the evidence, despite the betrayal burning in his chest, some part of Michael still loved Ellie. 6 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight. "I don't know," he admitted. "I need to understand why. If it's just physical, or if she's actually in love with him." "Based on what I've seen, it's not just physical," Caroline said gently. "The text messages I found were emotionally intimate. Plans for a future." Michael's stomach clenched. "They're planning to leave us?" "David has been researching apartments in the city. They've discussed timing, waiting until after the holidays, minimizing fallout." Her clinical delivery couldn't hide her own pain. "I have 2 children to consider. I can't afford to just walk away without securing my position." Children. The family David was willing to abandon. The family Michael and Ellie had been discussing starting. The realization that she might have been deliberately delaying their parenthood plans while entertaining a future with another man made him physically ill. "What are you proposing?" he asked finally. "Exposure," Caroline replied. "Not vindictive, but public enough that they can't minimize or deny it. Then we each decide our terms for either divorce or reconciliation." "You'd consider staying with him? After this?" "I don't know," she echoed his earlier uncertainty. 20 years of marriage, 2 children, it's complicated. But I won't make that decision from a position of weakness or ignorance. They spent the next hour comparing notes, filling in gaps in each other's knowledge. Caroline had dates, locations, text messages. Michael had noticed personality changes, new habits, unexplained expenses. Together, they constructed a complete picture of a 7-month affair that had grown increasingly serious. Their department has a quarterly dinner next Friday, Caroline said as they prepared to leave. Spouses are invited. I think that's our moment. To confront them? In front of colleagues? She nodded. Professional enough that they won't make a scene, public enough that they can't deny or minimize. We present the evidence, state our boundaries, and leave them to deal with the consequences. Michael considered her strategy. It was direct, unavoidable, and would prevent Ellie and David from controlling the narrative afterward. No opportunity to paint them as paranoid or unreasonable. I'll need this week, he said. To get my financial information in order. To prepare. Of course. Caroline handed him a small device. It's a voice recorder. Connecticut is a one-party consent state. Record any conversations with Ellie that might be relevant to divorce proceedings, if it comes to that. As they parted ways, Caroline gripped his arm briefly. Michael, remember, whatever happens, their choices aren't a reflection of your worth. This isn't about you not being enough. Her words stayed with Michael throughout the week that followed, a strange limbo where he maintained the appearance of normalcy while documenting the demise of his marriage. He recorded Ellie's casual lies about working late. He photographed credit card statements showing hotel charges and gifts. He backed up phone records highlighting the frequency and duration of their communications. Each night, he'd lie beside his wife, wondering if she felt any guilt, any conflict about her double life. Sometimes he'd catch her looking at him with what seemed like genuine affection, and he'd momentarily doubt the evidence. Then she'd turn away to check her phone, a small smile playing at her lips, and the reality would crash back. Caroline and Michael spoke daily, brief check-ins to maintain their resolve. They never met in person again before the dinner, too risky with their spouse's heightened awareness, but developed an unexpected solidarity in their shared pain. She was methodical where he was emotional, practical where he was still processing shock. Together, they formed a surprisingly effective team. The night of the company dinner arrived with grim inevitability. Michael dressed carefully, selecting a suit he knew Ellie thought he looked good in. She seemed pleased by his effort, even helping adjust his tie with familiar intimacy that now felt like another betrayal. You'll finally meet more of my team tonight, she said as they drove to the restaurant. Not just David. I'm looking forward to it, he replied, the recorder heavy in his pocket. When they arrived, Caroline and David were already there, along with about 20 other people at the long table. Michael watched Ellie carefully as she greeted David. The professional distance they maintained contrasted with the electricity that passed between their eyes. Caroline caught his gaze across the table and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Dinner progressed normally through appetizers and main courses. Colleagues discussed projects, spouses chatted about children and hobbies, wine flowed freely. Anyone observing would have seen a perfectly pleasant corporate gathering. Only Caroline and Michael recognized the subtle tells, the way David angled his body toward Ellie whenever speaking, the private jokes they shared with just a glance, the careful avoidance of any accidental touch that might reveal their comfort with each other's bodies. As dessert was being served, Caroline stood, tapping her glass gently. If I could have everyone's attention for a moment. Conversations quieted as people turned toward her. I know this isn't traditional at a work function, but I wanted to take this opportunity, with David's colleagues present, to acknowledge something important. Her voice was steady, her smile fixed in place. Today is actually the anniversary of when I discovered my husband's affair with Ellie. The table went completely silent. David froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Ellie's face drained of color. Caroline, David started, but she continued as if he hadn't spoken. I have here, she held up her phone, documented evidence of their 7-month relationship. Hotel receipts, text messages, photographs. I've known for 3 months and have been gathering information while determining my response. She turned to Michael. Michael has been aware for 1 week, since I shared my findings with him at our dinner last Friday. All eyes shifted to Michael. He stood, his heart hammering but his voice surprisingly calm. Ellie, I've loved you for 8 years. I've trusted you completely. Even when presented with evidence, I spent this week hoping there was an explanation, a way forward. He placed the voice recorder on the table. Instead, I confirmed everything Caroline discovered. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. Michael, please, we can talk about this privately. Like you talked about your future plans with David privately? He asked, his calm finally cracking. The apartment you were researching? The timeline for leaving us after the holidays? David stood abruptly. This is inappropriate. We're at a company function. Yes, you are, Caroline replied. The same company where you used business travel and late meetings as cover for your affair. The same colleagues you've been lying to, whose spouses have unknowingly socialized with people betraying their own partners. The department head, a woman in her 50s, cleared her throat. Perhaps we should give these four some privacy. No need, Michael said, gathering his coat. I've said what I came to say. Ellie, I'll be staying at my brother's. You have until the end of the month to decide what you want to do about the house. Caroline collected her purse. David, I've moved your things to the guest room. We'll discuss arrangements for the children tomorrow. She turned to the stunned table. Thank you all for your hospitality. I apologize for the disruption but not for the truth. As they walked out together, leaving their spouses in shocked silence, Caroline whispered, Are you okay? No, Michael admitted. But I will be. Outside in the cool evening air, they stood for a moment, two strangers bound by circumstance and shared trauma. What happens now? He asked. Now we start rebuilding, she replied, straightening her shoulders. On foundations of truth, not lies. They parted ways with a simple handshake, each returning to their separate lives, forever altered by the choices of the people they had loved and trusted most. As Michael drove to his brother's house, the weight of the recorder in his pocket seemed lighter somehow. The truth had finally been spoken aloud, and whatever came next would at least be real. Michael's brother James opened the door before he could knock, concern etched on his face. You okay? Your text sounded serious. My marriage is over, Michael said simply, stepping inside with the small overnight bag he'd packed earlier that week in preparation. Ellie's been having an affair. James guided him to the kitchen, pulled 2 beers from the refrigerator, and listened without interruption as Michael recounted the entire story, from the first mentions of David to the dramatic confrontation at the company dinner. Jesus, James exhaled when Michael finished. That Caroline woman has nerves of steel. She does, Michael agreed, thinking of her unwavering composure as she exposed her husband's betrayal. But underneath, she's hurting just as much as I am. So what's your next move? James asked. Lawyer up? Try counseling? Michael stared at his half-empty bottle. I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to believe there's something worth salvaging, but another part keeps seeing that photo of Ellie looking at David. His voice trailed off, the image still raw in his mind, his wife gazing at another man with an intimacy he thought was reserved for him. Stay as long as you need, James offered. Guest room's all yours. That night, Michael's phone lit up repeatedly with calls and texts from Ellie, which he ignored. Only when a final text came through, please let me know you're safe, did he respond with a terse I'm at James's. Don't contact me again tonight. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by replaying the evening's events and imagining conversations he wished he'd had with Ellie months ago. By morning, exhaustion had dulled the sharpness of his anger, leaving a hollow ache in its place. He was on his second cup of coffee when his phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. How are you holding up? Survived the night. You? Children asked why Dad's in the guest room. Told them we're working through some grown-up problems. David spent the night trying to explain himself. I'm not ready to hear it. Michael considered her position, the additional complexity of having children witness their family's disruption. At least you've got the home advantage. Harder to rewrite the narrative when you're under the same roof. True. Have you heard from her? Multiple calls/texts. Haven't responded beyond confirming my location. Need space to think. Smart. They'll try to regain control of the situation. Stay strong. The exchange with Caroline provided an unexpected comfort, someone who truly understood his situation, who wasn't offering platitudes or pushing him toward forgiveness or divorce. Just acknowledgement of the complex reality they both faced. Around noon, Michael's phone rang with a call from an unfamiliar number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Michael? It's David. The voice was tentative, lacking its usual confidence. Please don't hang up. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from right now. Michael's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? To apologize, for what it's worth. What Ellie and I did was inexcusable. The way you found out was, well, Caroline orchestrated that perfectly. Is that admiration I hear? Michael asked bitterly. For your wife's strategic thinking? Look, I'm not calling to defend myself or even explain. You deserve better than that. David paused. Ellie's devastated. She wants to talk to you, to try to explain. She knows where I am if she wants to talk directly. I don't need you as a messenger. That's fair. I just thought, since I'm part of why your marriage is in crisis, I should at least acknowledge my role. Michael considered hanging up but found himself asking the question that had haunted him all night. Were you planning to leave your family for her? After the holidays? The silence stretched for several beats. We discussed it, David finally admitted. But talking about something hypothetically is different from actually doing it. I don't know if either of us would have followed through. You researched apartments. Yes. I did. While your children were sleeping in their rooms, with their family photos on the walls, you were planning your exit. It wasn't that simple. It never is, Michael interrupted. Save the complications for your wife. You've said your piece to me. After hanging up, Michael sat motionless, processing the conversation. David's call had achieved one thing. It had clarified Michael's own position. The affair wasn't a momentary lapse or purely physical connection. It had progressed to planning a shared future, to researching homes, to timing their exit for minimal disruption to everyone except the spouses they were betraying. He texted Caroline, "David just called me. They were serious about leaving." He admitted researching apartments. Her response came quickly, "He's been trying to call me too. I blocked his number at work, only allowing communication about the children through my personal phone. Smart. Not smart. Necessary for my sanity." "Have you decided about talking to Ellie?" He hadn't, not consciously, but found himself typing, "Yes. Meeting her tomorrow to discuss logistics. Not ready for an emotional conversation yet." Caroline's response seemed to carry understanding beyond the simple text, "Protect yourself first. Everything else is secondary." The following day, Michael arranged to meet Ellie at a cafe near his office, neutral territory that offered privacy without intimacy. He arrived early, securing a corner table and ordering just water, his stomach too unsettled for anything else. When Ellie entered, he was struck by how different she looked, hair pulled back severely, minimal makeup, eyes reddened from what had clearly been substantial crying. She'd always been meticulous about her appearance, particularly in public. This dishevelment was so unlike her that it momentarily shook his resolve. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly, sliding into the chair across from him. "I'm only here to discuss practical matters," Michael replied, keeping his voice steady. "The house, finances, next steps." Ellie nodded, though her expression revealed hope that the conversation might extend beyond logistics. "I understand. I just want to say first that I'm so..." "Don't," he interrupted. "I'm not ready to hear apologies or explanations. I spent a week listening to your lies while knowing the truth. I need time before I can hear anything else from you." She flinched but nodded again. "Okay. Just know that when you're ready, I want to talk about everything. Honestly." "Honestly," Michael repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. "Let's focus on the immediate situation. I've spoken with an attorney. He's drawing up separation papers." "Separation? Not divorce?" "For now. It gives us both time to consider options without making permanent legal decisions while emotional." Relief flickered across her face, which Michael noted but didn't acknowledge. She still wanted a door left open, whether from genuine feeling or practical concerns about their entwined lives. They discussed the house. Ellie would stay temporarily while Michael remained at his brother's. They'd split bills proportionally based on their incomes. Neither would make major financial decisions without consulting the other. The conversation was almost surreally calm, like business partners dissolving a venture rather than spouses confronting betrayal. As they were preparing to leave, Ellie reached across the table, stopping just short of touching his hand. "Michael, I know you don't want to hear this yet, but I need to say it. What happened with David, it wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me being selfish and lost and making terrible choices." He looked at her directly for the first time since she'd arrived. "Caroline said almost the same thing. That their choices weren't a reflection of my worth." Ellie blinked in surprise. "You and Caroline have been talking? Beyond planning the dinner reveal?" "We've been in contact, yes. We're the only two people who understand exactly what the other is experiencing right now." Something like jealousy flashed in Ellie's eyes before she quickly masked it. "Of course. That makes sense. Does it bother you?" Michael asked, suddenly curious. "The idea of me talking to Caroline? No, not at all. It's just unexpected." But he could see it did bother her, the notion that her betrayal had created a connection between her husband and David's wife, a bond forged through shared trauma that excluded both Ellie and David. "I should go," she said, gathering her purse. "Thank you for meeting me. I'll wait until you're ready to talk about the rest." As she walked away, Michael realized he felt nothing like the anticipated satisfaction of seeing her distressed, just a profound sadness for what had been lost, not just their marriage, but his fundamental understanding of the woman he'd built his life around. That evening, he received a text from Caroline. "David moved his things out today. Told the children Daddy needs space to work through some adult problems. They cried. Michael felt a surge of anger on behalf of children he'd never met, casualties in a war they didn't start. How are you holding up? Numb, functional, walking through necessary motions while feeling disconnected from everything. You? Similar. Met with Ellie. Discussed logistics. She seemed surprised we'd been in contact. David asked directly if I'd been conspiring with you. Told him our communication is none of his business now. The conversation continued intermittently through the evening, practical updates about their situations, occasional dark humor about their shared circumstance, mutual encouragement when one's resolve seemed to waver. It was the most honest interaction Michael had experienced in months, perhaps because there was nothing left to lose, no image to maintain, no relationship to protect through careful omissions. Days stretched into weeks. Michael established a new routine: work, occasional dinners with James or friends, regular text exchanges with Caroline. He and Ellie communicated primarily through email, discussing house maintenance issues and financial matters with a formality that would have been unrecognizable months earlier. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Caroline suggested meeting for coffee again. The children are with my parents this weekend, she explained when they met at the same cafe where they'd first planned their strategy. First time I've had space to actually process everything without managing their emotions too. Michael nodded, understanding. How are they doing? Better than I expected. Worse than I'd hoped. She stirred her tea absently. Emma asked if Daddy doesn't love us anymore. Ryan pretends everything's normal but has started having nightmares. I'm sorry, Michael said, genuinely pained for the collateral damage to innocent children. Have you made any decisions about next steps with David? That's partly why I wanted to meet. Caroline set down her spoon. He's been calling daily, sending letters, asking for counseling. Says he's ended all contact with Ellie, that the affair was a terrible mistake he'll regret forever. Do you believe him? That he regrets it? Yes. That he'd never do it again? She shrugged. I'm not sure that matters. Something fundamental has changed. I look at him and see a stranger wearing my husband's face. Michael understood exactly what she meant. His few interactions with Ellie carried that same sense of dissonance, familiar features arranged in patterns he no longer recognized. What about you? Caroline asked. Ellie still hoping for reconciliation? She says so. Sends daily emails, first apologizing, now recounting memories from early in our relationship, as if reminding me of happier times might erase what happened. Are you considering it? Reconciliation? Michael had been asking himself the same question repeatedly. I honestly don't know. Part of me thinks with enough therapy, enough transparency, enough time, maybe. Another part feels like something irreplaceable has been lost. Trust, Caroline supplied. The foundation you mentioned at our first meeting. Exactly. And without it, what are we rebuilding on? Quicksand? Hope and wishful thinking? They sat in companionable silence, two people contemplating parallel crossroads. Finally, Caroline spoke again. I've decided to file for divorce, she said quietly. The children complicate things, but staying in a marriage without trust would teach them the wrong lesson about relationships. Michael nodded, respecting her certainty even as he envied it. When will you tell him? Next week, after I've met with my attorney to understand the process completely. She hesitated before adding, I wanted to tell you first. You've become important to me through all this. The admission hung between them, not romantic, but significant nonetheless. A recognition of connection forged through shared pain and mutual support. You've been a lifeline, Michael acknowledged. Someone who understands without judgment, who saw the situation clearly when I was still confused by gaslighting and manipulation. We've helped each other, Caroline said simply, found strength in solidarity. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Caroline impulsively hugged Michael, the first physical contact they'd shared beyond handshakes. It was brief but conveyed volumes: gratitude, understanding, shared resilience. That evening, Michael sat in his temporary room at James's house, contemplating Caroline's decision and his own unresolved feelings. The clarity she possessed seemed to illuminate his own uncertainty by contrast. What was he waiting for? Some magical insight that would make the path forward obvious? His phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. The hot water heater is making strange noises. Should I call someone or would you want to look at it first? Such a mundane question, layered with subtext. Was she genuinely asking about home maintenance, or creating an excuse for him to return to their shared space? Was her consideration of his preference a sign of respect or manipulation? Before he could respond, another text arrived. I miss you every day. I know I have no right to say that, but it's the truth. The house feels empty without you. Michael stared at the messages, feeling the familiar pull of history and attachment warring with the fresh wound of betrayal. He began typing several responses before settling on, "Call Wilson Plumbing. They've worked on it before. Use the home maintenance credit card." He hesitated, then added, "I'm not ready to discuss anything beyond practical matters. Please respect that." Her response was immediate, "I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes." The next morning, Michael awoke to an email from his attorney with the separation agreement Ellie had signed without modification. The document outlined the terms they'd discussed: temporary separation, split household expenses, no major financial decisions without mutual consent. Her cooperation suggested either genuine remorse or strategic patience, he wasn't sure which, and the uncertainty itself was exhausting. Michael forwarded the document to Ellie with a brief note, "I'll be coming by Saturday at 2 p.m. to collect more of my clothes and some work materials. Please let me know if that timing doesn't work for you." Her reply came within minutes, "That's fine. Would you like me to be out of the house?" The question gave him pause. Would it be easier to enter their home without her present? Probably. But it would also delay the inevitable, facing her in the space they'd shared, navigating the physical reminder of their fractured relationship. "No need to leave. I won't be staying long." Saturday arrived with leaden skies threatening rain, matching Michael's mood as he drove to the house he'd shared with Ellie for 5 years. The familiar street, the oak tree they'd planted together in the front yard, the porch swing where they'd spent summer evenings, each sight triggered memories that now seemed like scenes from someone else's life. He parked in the driveway rather than the garage, a small but meaningful choice that positioned him as a visitor rather than resident. Ellie opened the door before he could knock, her expression carefully neutral though her eyes reflected apprehension. "Hi," she said simply, stepping aside to let him enter. "Hi." Michael moved past her, immediately noting small changes in the house: flowers on the entry table that hadn't been there before, a different arrangement of throw pillows on the couch, subtle attempts to refresh a space heavy with shared history. "I pulled some of your seasonal clothes from storage," Ellie offered, gesturing toward neatly folded stacks on the dining room table. "Wasn't sure what you might need with the weather changing." "Thank you." The politeness felt strange, formal exchanges where intimate shorthand had once existed. "I need some files from the office too." "Of course. Everything's as you left it." He moved through the house with deliberate efficiency, collecting clothes, files, a few personal items he'd been missing. Ellie maintained a respectful distance, hovering at the periphery of his awareness without directly engaging. In his home office, Michael found himself lingering over photographs, their wedding day, hiking trips, family gatherings, visual evidence of a shared life that had seemed solid and true. Had it all been an illusion? Or had something real existed before transforming into whatever led Ellie to seek connection elsewhere? "We were happy then," Ellie said quietly from the doorway, noticing his focus on the photos. "That wasn't fake." Michael set down the frame he'd been holding. "Maybe. But it makes me question everything now. Were you already unhappy when this was taken? Already looking elsewhere without telling me?" "No." She stepped into the room but maintained distance. "The affair with David, it didn't start because I was looking for something. It happened gradually, conversations that became confidences, lunches that extended too long, boundaries that blurred until crossing them seemed inevitable rather than chosen." "That doesn't make it better," Michael said, turning to face her. "It might actually make it worse, that you risked everything we built not for some grand passion you couldn't resist, but through a series of small compromises you didn't bother to stop." Ellie flinched. "You're right. I'm not trying to minimize it. Just trying to explain that I didn't wake up one day planning to betray you. I made 1,000 small choices that led somewhere devastating, each one seeming manageable until suddenly I was living a double life and couldn't find my way back." The explanation held a certain logic that Michael found both clarifying and disturbing. Not a single catastrophic decision, but an accumulation of small failures: to communicate honestly, to maintain boundaries, to prioritize their marriage over momentary comfort or excitement. "Have you spoken to him since the dinner?" he asked, suddenly curious about the aftermath on the other side of the equation. Ellie looked down. "He called once. To say he's focusing on his family, that we need to end contact completely. Caroline's filing for divorce," Michael said, watching her reaction closely. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something more complex: regret? Relief? "I didn't know. David hasn't updated me on their situation. She told me last week. She's meeting with her attorney to start the process." "You and Caroline still talk regularly?" It wasn't quite a question. "We do." "Are you?" Ellie hesitated. "Is there something developing between you two?" The question caught Michael off guard. We're friends. Connected by circumstance. Nothing romantic. But you understand each other in ways no one else can right now. He couldn't deny the observation. Yes. Ellie nodded, accepting this with visible effort. And us? Have you decided about us? The question he'd been avoiding, both with her and within himself. No, he admitted. I'm still processing everything. Still trying to understand how we got here and whether there's any way back. I want to try, she said simply. Whatever it takes, therapy, complete transparency, rebuilding from the ground up. I know I've broken something precious, but I want the chance to repair it. Her sincerity seemed genuine, her remorse palpable. But Michael remembered Caroline's words about trust. How could they rebuild on a foundation so thoroughly compromised? I need more time, he said finally, gathering the last of his files. This isn't a decision I can make while still coming to terms with what happened. Ellie nodded, disappointment evident but acceptance prevailing. I understand. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. No pressure, no timeline. As Michael prepared to leave, box of belongings in his arms, Ellie asked one final question. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? He paused at the door, considering the weight of her question. I don't know, he answered honestly. But I'm trying to understand. That might be the first step. In the driveway, Michael loaded his belongings into the car, feeling the weight of unresolved questions pressing against his chest. As he drove away, rain finally began to fall, blurring the outline of the house in his rearview mirror, the perfect visual metaphor for his marriage, once clear and defined, now indistinct and uncertain. 6 weeks after the confrontation at the company dinner, Michael sat in his attorney's office reviewing divorce papers. Not separation papers, the documents that would permanently dissolve his marriage to Ellie. The decision hadn't come in a dramatic moment of clarity, but through a gradual accumulation of realizations during sleepless nights and contemplative mornings. These are preliminary, his attorney, Sandra Keller, explained. We can modify any terms before filing. The division of assets is straightforward since you've maintained good financial records. Michael nodded, scanning the clinical language that reduced 6 years of marriage to property distributions and legal obligations. And once I sign? We file with the court, have Ellie served, and begin the mandatory waiting period. Connecticut requires 60 days minimum before finalization. She'll want to contest it, Michael said, certain of this despite their limited communication over recent weeks. She's still hoping for reconciliation. Sandra's expression remained neutral. That's her right, but it won't stop the process. Do you want me to initiate settlement discussions directly with her attorney? Not yet. Let me tell her my decision first. She deserves that much. After leaving Sandra's office, Michael texted Caroline, meeting with attorney completed. Decided to file for divorce. Her response came quickly. How are you feeling about it? Sad. Relieved. Certain. How did your filing go? David received papers yesterday. Already calling my attorney requesting mediation instead of litigation. Michael wasn't surprised by David's approach. The man would want to control the narrative, minimize public exposure, and protect his professional image after the company dinner revelation. Will you consider mediation? He asked. Only with significant guardrails. My attorney is preparing terms. Children's interests come first. Their conversation shifted to practical updates, Caroline's plans to list their house, Michael's search for a permanent apartment, the emotional logistics of dismantling shared lives. Throughout their weeks of communication, they'd maintained a careful boundary, supportive without becoming entangled, honest without oversharing. Michael found himself increasingly grateful for this balanced connection during an otherwise turbulent time. That evening, he called Ellie. Can we meet tomorrow? We need to talk. Of course, she replied, hope evident in her voice. Would you like to come to the house? I could make dinner. No, Michael said gently but firmly. Let's meet at Riverside Park. Around noon. The hope in her voice dimmed. The park. Okay. By the fountain? That works. I'll see you then. The following day brought unexpected sunshine after a week of rain. Michael arrived at the park early, securing a bench with some privacy from the weekend crowds enjoying the improved weather. When Ellie approached, he noted she'd taken particular care with her appearance, wearing the blue dress he'd always complimented, hairstyled the way he preferred. Hi, she said, settling beside him with a careful distance between them. It's good to see you. You too, Michael replied, meaning it despite everything. Regardless of her betrayal, seeing Ellie still triggered complex emotions, anger and hurt layered over the muscle memory of love developed through years of shared life. How have you been? She asked, her tone carefully conversational. Managing. Staying busy with work. Looking at apartments actually. Her expression faltered slightly. Apartments? Not just temporary housing? Ellie. Michael turned to face her directly. I've decided to file for divorce. The color drained from her face. Divorce? But we haven't even tried counseling, or had real conversations about what happened, or… I know. And I've thought about that. But I keep coming back to the same question, what are we trying to save? Our marriage, she said immediately. 8 years together, 6 years of marriage. All the good times, the life we built. The life where you were secretly seeing someone else for 7 months. Michael interrupted, his voice remaining even despite the painful words. The marriage where you were actively planning to leave after the holidays? Ellie flinched. I was confused, lost, making terrible choices I've regretted every day since. I believe you regret it, Michael acknowledged. But regret doesn't rebuild trust, and without trust, what would we be rebuilding? We could learn to trust again, she insisted. With time, with transparency, with work. Michael shook his head slowly. The thing is, I've realized it's not just about the affair. It's about what the affair revealed. When you were unhappy or unsatisfied or whatever led to this, you turned away from our marriage instead of toward it. You made thousands of small choices to invest emotionally in someone else rather than address problems with me. Tears filled Ellie's eyes. I know. I made terrible choices. And that pattern, of avoiding difficult conversations, of seeking external solutions rather than facing internal problems, that existed before David. It would likely exist after him too. I can change, she whispered. I'm already changing. Therapy is helping me understand why I did what I did. I'm glad therapy is helping, Michael said sincerely. And maybe someday you'll build a healthy relationship with someone new. But our foundation is too damaged. I'd always be waiting for the next secret, the next betrayal. That's not a marriage, it's a surveillance operation. Ellie wiped her eyes, visibly trying to maintain composure in the public setting. You've really thought this through. I have, 4 weeks. It wasn't an impulsive decision. Is it because of her? Ellie asked suddenly. Caroline? Michael frowned. What do you mean? You two have been talking regularly, supporting each other through this. Has that become something more? No, Michael replied firmly. Caroline and I are friends connected by shared circumstance. Nothing romantic has happened, but you understand each other in a way no one else can right now. There was truth in her observation that Michael couldn't deny. Yes, we do. But that's not why I'm filing for divorce. This is about us, about what broke between us and why I don't believe it can be properly repaired. Ellie nodded slowly, seeming to accept his explanation even as fresh tears tracked down her cheeks. What happens now? My attorney will file the papers next week. Your attorney will be contacted. We'll need to finalize asset division, though I'm not looking to be punitive. Fair and straightforward. The house? We should sell it. Split the proceeds. Too many memories there for either of us to stay. They sat in silence for several minutes, the finality of the conversation settling between them like an invisible wall. Around them, families enjoyed picnics, couples walked hand in hand, children chased each other across the grass, ordinary moments of connection that highlighted the dissolution occurring on their park bench. I really did love you, Ellie said finally. That wasn't a lie. I know, Michael replied. I loved you too. But love isn't enough without honesty and trust. As they prepared to leave, Ellie reached for his hand briefly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for all of it. Not just getting caught, but for every decision that led us here. You deserved better. Michael nodded, accepting her apology without offering forgiveness that wasn't yet fully formed. Take care of yourself, Ellie. You too, Michael. Walking back to his car, Michael felt an unexpected lightness, not happiness, but the unburdening that comes with a difficult decision finally made. The path ahead would hold its own challenges, but at least it was a path of his choosing rather than one dictated by deception and betrayal. That evening, his phone rang with a call from Caroline. I hope it's not too late, she said when he answered. Just wanted to check in after your conversation with Ellie. It went about as expected, Michael replied, settling into the armchair in his temporary bedroom. Tears, attempts to convince me to reconsider, questions about you. Questions about me? She wanted to know if there was something romantic happening between us. If that was influencing my decision. Caroline was quiet for a moment. What did you tell her? The truth. That we're friends connected by unusual circumstances. That my decision is about our marriage, not about anyone else. And is that true? Completely true? The question carried weight beyond its simple phrasing. Michael considered it carefully. Yes, he said finally. My decision to divorce Ellie is entirely about what happened between us, what it revealed about our relationship patterns, and what I believe about our potential future together, or lack thereof. But, Caroline prompted gently. But, Michael acknowledged, I can't deny that our conversations over these weeks have been significant. You've helped me think clearly when everything felt chaotic. You've understood parts of this experience no one else could. I felt the same, Caroline admitted. Which is why I think we should be careful. Careful? About blurring lines. About mistaking trauma bonding for something deeper. About rebounding from marriages that haven't even been legally dissolved yet. Michael recognized the wisdom in her caution. You're right. The timing is all wrong. The timing is terrible, Caroline agreed. And yet, I find myself thinking about you. Not just as a fellow traveler through this awful experience, but as someone I've come to genuinely value. Someone I might want to know better under different circumstances. The admission created a suspended moment of possibility, not a declaration or invitation, but an acknowledgement of potential that existed alongside their present reality. I feel the same, Michael said quietly. And I agree we need to be careful. Respectful of the processes we're still navigating. Mindful of the healing we both need. So we continue as we have been, Caroline suggested. Supporting each other through the divorce proceedings. Processing our respective experiences. Being honest about our feelings without acting prematurely. And afterward? When the legal aspects are completed? Afterward, she said, we reassess. Without pressure or expectation. Just two people who might have something worth exploring, if we've both done the necessary healing first. The approach felt right, thoughtful rather than impulsive, respectful of their complicated circumstances while acknowledging the genuine connection that had formed between them. I can work with that, Michael agreed. Their conversation shifted to more immediate matters, Caroline's children's adjustment to their new reality, Michael's apartment hunting progress, the practical logistics of lives in transition. When they finally said goodnight, Michael felt a sense of possibility that had been absent in the weeks since discovering Ellie's betrayal, not a replacement for what was lost, but the potential for something new to eventually emerge from the wreckage. The divorce proceedings unfolded with surprising efficiency over the following months. Ellie, despite her initial reluctance, ultimately chose not to contest the filing, perhaps recognizing the futility of fighting for a marriage Michael had definitively concluded. Their assets were divided equitably, the house sold for a reasonable profit split between them, and their lives disentangled with as much dignity as possible under the circumstances. David and Caroline's divorce proved more complex due to the children, but David's desire to protect his professional reputation made him amenable to generous terms regarding custody and support. By the 6-month mark after the company dinner revelation, both marriages were legally dissolved, their dramatic conclusions fading into the background of daily routines and rebuilding efforts. Michael settled into a downtown apartment with views of the river, a space entirely his own, decorated according to his preferences without compromise or consideration of anyone else's taste. The freedom felt simultaneously liberating and lonely, a contradiction he was learning to navigate as he reconstructed his identity as an individual rather than half of a partnership. Caroline focused on creating stability for her children, establishing new traditions and routines in the smaller house she'd purchased closer to their school. She and Michael maintained regular contact, sometimes daily texts, occasional phone calls, coffee meetings every few weeks, their connection evolving gradually as the initial crisis that had brought them together receded. 9 months after the confrontation at Vincenzo's, Michael received a text from Caroline, "The children are with David this weekend. Would you like to have dinner? Just dinner, no pressure or expectations." The invitation represented a subtle shift, an acknowledgement that perhaps enough healing had occurred to consider carefully exploring the connection that had developed between them. "I'd like that," he replied. "I know a good Italian place." "Not Vincenzo's, I hope," came her immediate response, accompanied by the laughing emoji. "Definitely not. Some places are better left in the past." When they met at the restaurant, a casual bistro with none of the formality or memories associated with Vincenzo's, Michael was struck by how different Caroline looked from their first meeting. The tension and watchfulness that had characterized her expression that night had given way to something more relaxed, more authentic. "You look well," he observed as they settled at their table. "I feel well," she replied. "Most days, anyway. The children are adjusting better than I expected. David is actually being a more attentive father now than when we were married, perhaps compensating for guilt, but the result is positive regardless." "And you? Beyond the practical aspects?" Caroline considered the question thoughtfully. I'm healing. Not completely, not perfectly, but genuinely. I've learned to trust my instincts again after years of having them dismissed. I've reclaimed parts of myself that got lost somewhere in 20 years of marriage. That resonates, Michael said. I'm still figuring out who I am independently, after defining myself as half of Michael and Ellie for so long. Their conversation flowed easily through dinner, touching on work developments, family updates, books they'd recently read, perspectives gained through their respective therapy journeys. Unlike their earlier interactions, focused heavily on processing betrayal and navigating divorce logistics, this exchange felt forward-looking, an exploration of who they were becoming rather than what they had lost. Any regrets? Caroline asked as they shared dessert. About how we handled everything? Michael considered the question. Sometimes I wonder if the public confrontation at the dinner was necessary, if there might have been a less dramatic way to address what was happening. I've thought about that too, she admitted. But I keep coming back to the same conclusion. They controlled the narrative for months through deception and manipulation. The public revelation prevented them from continuing that pattern, from minimizing or denying what was happening. True. And in retrospect, it forced clarity that might have taken much longer to achieve otherwise. As the evening concluded, they walked together along the riverfront, the early autumn air carrying a slight chill that hinted at seasonal changes ahead. This was nice, Caroline said as they paused to watch boats passing on the water. Different from our previous meetings. Less crisis management, more actual conversation, Michael agreed. I've enjoyed it. So have I. She turned to face him, her expression open but careful. I think we should do it again. Intentionally, not just as friends supporting each other through trauma, but as two people who might have something worth exploring. The directness of her statement, so characteristic of Caroline's approach to everything, made Michael smile. I'd like that very much. But slowly, she added. With awareness of where we've both been and what we're still processing. Slowly, Michael agreed. With open eyes and honest communication. When he took her hand, the gesture felt simultaneously momentous and natural. Not the beginning of something that would erase or replace what came before, but the first careful step into something new that honored rather than denied their complex histories. Who would have thought, Caroline said softly, that night at Vincenzo's when I showed you that hotel photograph, that we'd end up here. Not me, Michael admitted. But I'm grateful for it, despite everything that came before. As they continued their walk, hands linked comfortably between them, Michael reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun with betrayal and pain had gradually transformed into something unexpected, not a replacement for what was lost, but a new possibility built on foundations of honesty and mutual understanding. The path forward would require continued care, continued healing, continued thoughtful navigation of complex emotions and histories. But for the first time since hearing Caroline say they're sleeping together at that fateful dinner, Michael felt genuine optimism about the future. Not despite the painful truth that had emerged that night, but because of the clarity and growth it had ultimately made possible. Truth, however painful its initial revelation, had indeed set them both free to build something authentic, separately at first, and now, perhaps, together. 1 year after the confrontation at Vincenzo's, Michael stood in his kitchen preparing dinner while Caroline set the table. Her children, Emma, now 11, and Ryan, 8, were arranging napkins with exaggerated precision. Their ongoing competition to create the fanciest place settings a recent tradition that made Michael smile. Mom, Ryan's copying my napkin swan again, Emma complained, though without real annoyance. It's not the same, Ryan protested. Mine has a different neck. Caroline caught Michael's eye over the children's heads, her expression conveying both amusement and gratitude for his easy acceptance of these ordinary family moments. Both swans look perfect, she assured them. Michael, do we have any candles? Second drawer by the refrigerator, he replied, turning back to the pasta sauce simmering on the stove. The domesticity of the scene would have been unimaginable a year earlier, when both he and Caroline were still navigating the immediate aftermath of their respective divorces. Their relationship had developed with deliberate slowness, dinner dates becoming weekend outings, casual conversations deepening into meaningful exchanges, careful physical boundaries gradually relaxing as emotional intimacy solidified. Introducing Caroline's children had been approached with similar caution, first as Mom's friend Michael, then as someone who occasionally joined them for activities, and only in recent months as a more consistent presence in their lives. Tonight marked the first time they were staying overnight at his apartment, a small but significant milestone in their evolving family dynamic. Can we watch a movie after dinner? Ryan asked, completing his napkin arrangement with a flourish. If you finish your homework first, Caroline replied. Did you bring your math worksheet? Ryan's expression confirmed he hadn't, triggering a diplomatic negotiation about whether he could complete it tomorrow morning instead. Michael listened to the familiar rhythm of parent-child discussion, still adjusting to his new role in this ready-made family unit. As they sat down to dinner, Michael reflected on the unexpected journey of the past year. The devastating discovery of Ellie's affair with David had initially seemed like the end of something: his marriage, his trust in relationships, his understanding of his own life. Instead, it had become a painful but necessary transition into something he wouldn't have found otherwise. Michael, did you make this sauce from scratch? Emma asked, evaluating her plate with the seriousness of a food critic. I did. It's my grandmother's recipe. It's really good, she declared after careful consideration. Better than the restaurant one mom usually gets. Emma, Caroline admonished gently. What? It's a compliment, Emma protested, making Michael laugh. I'll take it as one, he assured her. And thank you. The conversation flowed easily through dinner, the children sharing school stories, Caroline discussing an upcoming project at the hospital, Michael contributing updates about his recent promotion. The ordinary exchange felt extraordinary to Michael, who had spent months after his divorce dining alone or with his brother's family, always slightly peripheral to their established dynamics. After the meal, while the children settled in the living room with their homework, Caroline helped Michael clear the table. They seem comfortable here, he observed quietly. They are, she confirmed. Emma was actually excited about staying over. Said your guest room is fancy like a hotel. Michael smiled. High praise from an 11-year-old. The highest. Caroline hesitated before adding, David asked them if they were okay with the overnight arrangement. Apparently, they both said yes without hesitation. The mention of David still created a momentary tension, though not the sharp pain of earlier months. Both David and Ellie had maintained presences in their ex-spouses' lives, David through co-parenting, Ellie through occasional emails about lingering financial matters that had continued even after their divorce was finalized. How are things with him? Michael asked, loading the dishwasher. The co-parenting situation? Surprisingly functional, Caroline admitted. He's remained consistent with visitation, calls them daily when they're with me, remembers important school events. Whatever his failings as a husband, he's working hard to be a good father. Michael nodded, acknowledging the complex reality of their situation. The affair that had destroyed their marriages had forced all four adults to evolve in unexpected ways. Caroline had found strength she hadn't known she possessed. Michael had developed a capacity for forgiveness that surprised even him. And according to Caroline, David had transformed from a somewhat distant father into a more engaged parent, perhaps compensating for his marital failures through renewed parental commitment. And Ellie? Any recent contact? Caroline asked, maintaining the honest communication that had been foundational to their relationship. An email last week, Michael replied. She's accepted a position in Chicago. Wanted to update her address for any remaining paperwork. How did that make you feel? Michael considered the question carefully, appreciating Caroline's directness. Relieved, mostly. Knowing she's starting fresh somewhere else makes it easier to move forward here without worrying about awkward encounters. The conversation paused as Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, math textbook in hand. Mom, can you help me with these word problems? They're confusing. Of course, Caroline replied. Let's sit at the table. As mother and daughter settled at the dining table, Michael finished cleaning the kitchen, listening to Caroline's patient explanations of mathematical concepts. Ryan soon joined them, spreading his spelling homework across the table's remaining space. The scene struck Michael with unexpected poignancy, this impromptu family study session in his once solitary apartment, the easy inclusion of his presence in their established rhythms. Later, after the children had fallen asleep in the guest room they were sharing, Michael and Caroline sat on his balcony, enjoying the mild spring evening and glasses of wine. They really are amazing kids, Michael said. You've done an incredible job with them, especially through everything this year. They've been remarkably resilient, Caroline agreed. The therapist says children often adjust better than we expect if the adults maintain consistency and open communication. You've certainly done that. Caroline was quiet for a moment, contemplating the city lights. I've been thinking about something. It might be too soon, but I wanted to put it on the table. What is it? Michael asked, recognizing her characteristic approach to important conversations. My lease is up in August. The children love their school district, so we need to stay in the general area, but the rental market is getting increasingly expensive. She turned to face him directly. Would you consider us looking for a place together? The three of us moving in with you, or all of us finding a new place that would truly be ours? The question caught Michael by surprise, not because he hadn't considered it but because he hadn't expected Caroline to propose it so directly. That's a significant step, he said carefully. It is, she acknowledged. Which is why I'm bringing it up now, months before any decisions would need to be made. Time to consider implications, discuss with the children, evaluate whether we're ready. Her thoughtful approach, presenting the idea with space for consideration rather than emotional pressure, reinforced what Michael had come to value most about their relationship. After years with Ellie, where important matters were often left unspoken until they became problems, Caroline's direct communication felt like a gift. I'd like to consider it seriously, he replied. It makes practical sense, and emotionally, I think we might be ready. But you're right that we should take time, especially to make sure Emma and Ryan are comfortable with the idea. Caroline nodded, seeming pleased with his measured response. I thought we could start with a family dinner specifically to discuss it. Be transparent about what we're considering, invite their questions and concerns, make sure they feel included in the process. That sounds like the right approach, Michael agreed, reaching for her hand. Thank you for bringing this up so thoughtfully. Thank you for considering it, she replied, squeezing his fingers. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined building a new life like this. The simple truth resonated deeply. A year earlier, they had both been shattered by betrayal, meeting in the aftermath to plan their strategic response. Now they were contemplating merging their lives, creating something new from the pieces of what had been broken. 2 weeks later, Michael found himself in an unexpected situation, sitting across from Ellie at a downtown cafe. Her request to meet before her move to Chicago had surprised him, but after consultation with both his therapist and Caroline, he had agreed to a brief, public meeting. Ellie looked different, her hair shorter, her style slightly altered, subtle changes that reflected her own evolution over the year since their marriage ended. Thank you for meeting me, she began after they had ordered coffee. I know it's an unusual request. It's fine, Michael replied, maintaining a polite but reserved demeanor. What did you want to discuss? Primarily, I wanted to apologize again, now that some time has passed and we've both had space to process everything. She met his eyes directly. What I did was inexcusable. The affair, the lies, the gaslighting when you suspected something was wrong. You deserved better, and I'm truly sorry for all of it. Michael nodded, acknowledging her apology without immediately offering forgiveness. I appreciate you saying that. I also wanted to let you know that therapy has helped me understand some of my patterns, the conflict avoidance, the tendency to seek external validation rather than addressing problems directly. I'm working on those things, trying to become someone who doesn't repeat those mistakes. That's good, Michael said sincerely. Self-awareness is important. Ellie hesitated before continuing. I heard through mutual friends that you're seeing Caroline, that things are serious between you. Michael tensed slightly, unsure where this was heading. Yes, we're in a relationship. I'm glad, Ellie said, surprising him. Really, I am. After everything that happened, you finding happiness feels like, I don't know, evidence that something good could come from such a terrible situation. Her sincerity seemed genuine, lacking the manipulative undertones he might have expected a year earlier. Thank you, he replied, relaxing slightly. And Chicago? That's a significant move. A fresh start, she confirmed. New job, new city, clean slate. The opportunity came unexpectedly, but it felt right. With David? The question emerged before Michael could consider its appropriateness. Ellie shook her head firmly. No. That ended completely after the company dinner. He chose to focus on his family, on trying to repair things with Caroline and the children. But that didn't work out, Michael observed, knowing the timeline of Caroline's divorce. No. Caroline made the right decision for herself and her children. Ellie's expression turned reflective. Consequences. We both faced them, as we should have. The conversation continued briefly, touching on practical matters regarding the last of their shared financial connections, mutual friends they'd both maintained contact with, final logistics of her relocation. As they prepared to leave, Ellie offered one last thought. I want you to know something, she said. My mistakes cost me a good marriage to someone who truly loved me. That's a regret I'll always carry. But seeing you find happiness with Caroline, building something new, it helps me believe I didn't completely destroy everything. Michael considered her words carefully. You didn't, he said finally. What happened was painful, but it led to growth and new possibilities. For all of us, I think. They parted with a brief handshake, no lingering embrace or promises to stay in touch. Some chapters needed definitive endings, and their marriage was one of them. As Michael watched Ellie walk away, he felt a sense of closure that had been building gradually over the past year, not forgetting or minimizing what had happened, but accepting it as part of a larger journey that had ultimately led somewhere unexpected and valuable. The family dinner to discuss potential living arrangements took place the following weekend at Caroline's rental house. Michael arrived early to help prepare, finding Emma setting the table with careful attention to detail while Ryan arranged flowers in a vase with less precision but equal enthusiasm. "Michael, is it true you're going to live with us?" Ryan asked immediately, his 8-year-old directness bypassing any planned gradual introduction to the topic. Caroline emerged from the kitchen, looking apologetic. "Emma mentioned our conversation to Ryan. I was waiting until dinner to discuss it properly." "Are you mad I told?" Emma asked, suddenly concerned. "Not at all," Michael assured her, setting down the dessert he'd brought. "It's an important topic for all of us to talk about together." During dinner, they had exactly that conversation, honest, age-appropriate discussion about what it might mean for all 4 of them to share a home. The children asked practical questions. Would they have their own rooms? Could they bring all their toys? Would Michael's apartment have enough space? Would they need to change schools? "We're thinking of finding a new place together," Caroline explained. "Something that would be enough space for everyone, in the same school district you're in now. Like a real family?" Ryan asked, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. The question created a momentary pause, all 3 adults struck by the simple but profound inquiry. "Yes," Michael said carefully. "Like a family. Different from before, but still a real family." "But you're not married," Emma pointed out with preteen logic. "Dad said you're Mom's boyfriend." "That's true," Caroline acknowledged. "Michael and I are in a relationship, but not married. People can be family in different ways." "Would you get married someday?" Ryan pressed, clearly working through the concept in real time. Michael and Caroline exchanged glances, neither having anticipated this direct question. They had discussed their relationship extensively, but marriage remained a topic approached with understandable caution given their recent experiences. "We might," Caroline said honestly. "But that would be a decision for the future, after we've had more time together as a family unit. And we would talk about that with you too," Michael added. "Just like we're talking about living together now. Your thoughts and feelings matter in these decisions." The conversation continued through dinner and dessert, the children's questions gradually shifting from the practical to the personal. Would Michael enforce the same rules as Mom? Would he come to school events? Would Dad still see them just as often? By the time the dishes were cleared, a tentative consensus had emerged. They would begin looking for a suitable house or apartment, with the children involved in the process. The move would happen after the school year ended, giving everyone time to adjust to the idea. And open communication would continue, with regular family meetings to address any concerns or questions that arose. Later, after the children were in bed, Michael and Caroline sat on her porch swing, processing the evening's discussion. "That went better than I expected," Caroline admitted. "Especially the direct questions about marriage. Kids have a way of cutting to the heart of things," Michael agreed. "No filters, just honest curiosity." "Speaking of which," Caroline turned to face him directly. "We've avoided that particular topic ourselves." "Marriage, I mean." "We have," Michael acknowledged. "For good reasons, I think. We've both been through difficult divorces. The idea of legal marriage carries complications neither of us was ready to consider." "And now?" she asked, her expression open but careful. Michael considered the question thoughtfully. "Now I find myself thinking about it differently. Not as a replacement for what was lost, but as a potential affirmation of what we've found." "That's beautifully put," Caroline said softly. "I've been thinking similarly. That perhaps someday, when we've built enough new history together, making that commitment might feel right. But not yet," Michael added. "Living together first, building our family identity, giving the children time to adjust to each transition." "Exactly. One step at a time." She leaned against him, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder. "Though I appreciate knowing we're thinking along similar lines." The conversation drifted to more immediate matters: house hunting parameters, moving logistics, summer activities for the children. Yet the brief acknowledgement of potential long-term commitment lingered in the background, not as pressure or expectation but as a shared recognition of possibility. 3 months later, Michael stood in the empty living room of a craftsman-style house they had just purchased together. The moving truck would arrive tomorrow with Caroline's furnishings. His apartment items would follow the day after. The children were with David for the weekend, giving the adults time to prepare the space before bringing them to their new home. Caroline joined him in the room, sliding an arm around his waist. "Having second thoughts?" she asked, noting his contemplative expression. "Not at all," he assured her. "Just thinking about the journey that led here. A year and a half ago, I was in a marriage I thought was solid, completely unaware of what was happening beneath the surface. Then everything collapsed in a single evening at Vincenzo's. When I showed you that hotel photograph," Caroline remembered, "you looked like the floor had dropped out from under you." "It had," Michael admitted. "Everything I thought I knew suddenly came into question. My marriage, my judgment, my understanding of my own life. And now?" He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Now I'm standing in a house we bought together, preparing to build a life I couldn't have imagined then. With someone who has shown me what genuine partnership and honest communication actually feel like." Caroline's eyes shone with emotion. "From the wreckage to this. Not a path I would have chosen, but one I'm grateful for nonetheless." "Me too," Michael said simply, drawing her closer. As they stood together in the empty room that would soon be filled with the combined elements of their lives, furniture and photographs, children's artwork and family meals, ordinary days and significant milestones, Michael reflected on the strange, painful, ultimately transformative journey that had brought them here. The revelation at Vincenzo's had shattered the foundation of his marriage, exposing the deception beneath Ellie's innocent claim that David was just a friend. But from that devastating moment, something unexpected had emerged, a connection with Caroline built on mutual understanding and shared experience, gradually evolving into genuine love and partnership. The betrayal that had once seemed like an ending had become, against all expectations, the beginning of something authentic and meaningful. Not because of the pain it caused, but because of how they had each chosen to respond to that pain, with honesty, with integrity, with willingness to rebuild rather than simply retreat. As Caroline left to direct the cable installation in the home office, Michael opened the front door to look out at the tree-lined street of what would soon be their family home. The future stretched before them, not perfect or guaranteed, but built on a foundation far stronger than what had come before, one where trust wasn't assumed but actively earned, where communication wasn't optional but essential, where love wasn't a cover for deception but a daily choice made with full awareness and intention. The door that had closed on his marriage to Ellie had ultimately opened to possibilities he couldn't have foreseen that night at Vincenzo's. Life's most painful moments, he had learned, sometimes contained within them the seeds of unexpected growth and renewal. Not immediately, not without grief and processing, but eventually, for those willing to move forward with open eyes and honest hearts. Michael closed the door and turned back to the empty house, ready to begin filling it with the furniture, the people, and the genuine connections that would transform it from a building into a home.